Welcome to today's episode of What the Hell. We're going to be talking about asset allocation today. Today I'm going to show you the rules of thumb of asset allocation, when to break them, and how to rebalance across accounts without triggering tax. So what even is asset allocation? Asset allocation means a mix of stocks, bonds, and cash, while asset location is what account these stocks, bonds, or cash are held in. The goal of asset allocation is to maximize your after-tax returns with the same risk and fees. So some quick ground rules, and these are ground rules that we have talked about before, and we are going to talk about them in the future just because they are so important. So number one is your RRSP. So your RSP is likely an account funded by you and your employer. Any contributions that you add can reduce your taxable income. So and only the funds that you contribute can be deducted. No funds contributed by your employer can be deducted. Also, be careful with your RSP because it is a tax deferred account. So this means any capital gains, dividends, or interest, though you don't pay taxes on the day that you receive them, you pay taxes on the day that you withdraw them out from that account. Account 2 is your TFSA, and a TFSA is like a perfect little savings account. It allows tax-free growth and withdrawals at your leisure. The one thing to be careful about with your TFSA is that U.S. Dividend-paying stocks are eligible up to 15% for withholding tax. Number 3 is your taxable account. And in this account, you must pay dividends as a regular cash dividend, and any capital gains, as soon as you realize them, you must also pay taxes on them. This account just isn't under the same kind of tax shield that RRSPs and TFSAs have. So now we got some core rules of thumb. Rule number 1 is that interest-heavy assets should either be placed in your RRSP or your TFSA. Interest is fully taxable, so they add it onto your net income for tax purposes, so it should be sheltered when possible. So number 2 is that U.S. dividends should only be placed in your RSP account when it's possible. This is because your RSP has a greater tax shield than your TFSA, and this allows for you not to have to pay that withholding tax. Number 3 is that Canadian paying stocks can be held in a taxable account because you do get a dividend tax credit that does soften the blow of receiving dividends in a taxable account. Number 4 is so any high growth speculative stocks should be placed in your TFSA. This is because when you do want to realize these capital gains on these high growth stocks, that you don't have to pay any tax on them, on those capital gains. So, and then for number 5, for low turnover, capital gain oriented exchange traded funds, they can be placed in a taxable account for 2 different reasons. Reason 1 is when you realize gains, you could use it to fill out your tax bracket, or you could also use, and this is number 2, you could use it to realize losses if needed to bring your money down from one bracket to another. So this is when you should break these rules. Simplicity at its best is amazing. Holding an ETF in a taxable account is okay if it keeps you invested. It doesn't really matter about that tiny little tax break because the gains that you're going to realize from that ETF are most likely more than you would make from putting that ETF in the correct shelter. Another time to break the rules is if for your immediate cash needs for, like, let's say a year or so, if you're going to hold GICs or guaranteed investment certificates, you should put them under your TFSA so that if they do have any interest income, you don't have to pay it on that. And then if they do grow, and let's say you do get a capital gain, when you do so that, or you don't have to pay any tax on it. It's a great way to have a tax-free savings account. These are some numbers to use as an example. If you had $100,000 in a U.S. dividend-paying stock that pays about 2% per year, you would be making $2,000. If you hold this in your RRSP, you're totally fine. You don't have to worry about any withholding tax. But if you're holding it in your TFSA, you have to pay that 15% withholding tax. The 15% of the $2,000 is $300 a year that you'd be missing out on. So not really quite ideal, but also not really that big of a difference. When you're holding Canadian paying dividends, the account doesn't really matter as much because if you hold them in a taxable account, and we've said this before, but if you hold them in a taxable account and you get paid dividends, there is a dividend tax credit that you can use to reduce your taxes payable. Now we're going to be looking at some tips on how to build this at a household level. So number one is right target for allocating your assets at a household level and not just as an individual. List the sizes of your accounts, your RSP, your TFSA, and your taxable accounts. You must also assign the assets using the rules of thumb as before. These are crucial to stick by as they will reduce your taxes payable if you play them right. One more tip is keep a one-page note of where things live, so you aren't confused on which accounts hold what and where you need to be allocating assets, where you maybe need to take some money out of a certain stock or ETF or put some money into a certain stock or ETF. Now we are going to move into some common pitfalls. Number one is selling outside of your registered account. And I get it, sometimes money can be tough. But if you're going to sell off to cover some bills, make sure you sell off in your TFSA and not in your taxable account, and certainly not in your RSP. So number two is holding US dividends in your TFSA without realizing the withholding drag. And this is something that I've actually messed up myself. Number three is chasing tiny tax wins when you're increasing your management fee or adding a currency conversion. You want to avoid these because the tiny amount that you might be winning on your taxes could be completely offset by a higher management fee or having to convert into a different currency. Number four, if you're going to sell to realize gains in a taxable account, try to sell just enough to fill out the tax bracket that you're currently in. This way you get to realize those gains and have a little bit of extra money, but it's not moving a certain amount into a higher tax bracket that now you're paying extra tax on. So a final recap of everything that we've just talked about. Allocation of your assets is always number one. Making sure that you have the proper investments in the correct accounts. Remember the withholding tax on US dividend paying stocks. It doesn't happen in your RSP, but if you hold them in your TFSA, then it will happen. And your TFSA is your growth account. When you realize capital gains, you won't ever need to pay tax on them because it's sheltered under your TFSA. So that has been What the Hell is Asset Allocation? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to tune in next week where we'll talk about derivative investing.